two elements of what I call an alternative strategy. Two of the elements are show some love vis-a-vis positive memories and show some wisdom via critical memories. We're talking about memories of Israel, or it could be either one, Palestine or Israel. It could be a Palestinian, an Arab memory as well. So show some love and show some wisdom. So I've got some little fragments of stories. Some of them could be full-blown stories, but I want to just kind of spritz some fragments of a range of stories. And all of these stories come out of the first trip when I was only 18 in 1969 and went on a group trip sponsored by American Zionist movement to kibbutz. It was a kibbutz-oriented program, and it was meant to, summer of 69, and it was meant to be 8 weeks, something like that. It never turned out at all the way it was planned, but there were a lot of interesting things that happened. So the first thing that was really stuck out for me was going up into the Upper Galilee, which is all the way up, in this case, by the Lebanese border. And there was no real border at the time. You could walk across the border because the kibbutz that we ended up being assigned to, which was a very radical secular kibbutz, was right on the border. A radical secular kibbutz founded a lot by Americans. American Jews, not the US government. So the hills of Upper Galilee, they're not huge mountains, they're hills. And what you could see at night were these lights, little lights, not big headlights, not street lights, but little lights of little villages. And it was just so romantic and so beautiful. Now I remember that there actually was a memory before that, and this is one that's not necessarily love, it's not necessarily critical, it's just observation, which was, we had gotten there and we were put on a kibbutz that wasn't going to work out. There was some screw up, let me say. So they didn't know what to do with us, our particular group. So they put us up in this hostel, youth hostel, or hostel. And we were there for a week, which is way too long a time. And what we encountered were Israeli reserve soldiers, not from a high unit, pretty much from a low-level unit, and they were smoking grass like crazy. And we were also into weed and smoking, and we were amazed that these soldiers in the reserves were smoking a lot of weed. So it was after that we went to that kibbutz in the northern Galilee, right on the Lebanese border. One of the agricultural tasks that we did was, this is very, very old-fashioned, was in order to transport cotton. The cotton was grown there, and cotton is put in this huge, huge bin. Not a bin, it's a large bin that's pulled by a very strong truck, I guess, right? But they put in the cotton, and then we were assigned to jump on the cotton to help push it down. That was a hell of a lot of fun. Hell of a lot of fun. Never had experience doing that. And almost all of us, volunteers from America, had almost no agricultural experience. How would we? We're Jewish kids growing up in suburbs or cities. The volunteers that they liked the most in all the kibbutz team were from Holland, and maybe Denmark as well, maybe Switzerland. And they were people who were harder working, more disciplined, and so forth. So jumping on cotton was one of the memories. Then I would say this is maybe the most outstanding memory. And it's called the Shlomo Carlebach story. Shlomo Carlebach became, or was already, a famous Hasidic Jew, rabbi, musician, singer-songwriter, performer, and charismatic guy, totally. I think he was originally from Germany, He had an accent, but he was very, very in touch with American culture. And he had set up a site at the height of the hippie movement in San Francisco called the House of Love and Prayer. What happened was, Jerusalem Post is the English language newspaper, or was the only one at the time in Israel. And they have a weekend section like all papers do. And on the cover of one of the weekend sections was an article, photograph of Shlomo Carlebach. I think they called him the hippie rabbi. And I said, when I read that, I said, I got to meet this guy. I got to meet this guy. So you get the point. I think you can see where this is going. The early part of the story, which is not a good memory, it's a critical memory, was that kibbutz Sasa, up on the Lebanese border, founded by Americans, was a very unfriendly place, and which was pretty unusual, I think, at the time. We got into smoking weed because we were bored, and we became a little provocative. So what happened was, the guy who was the liaison for the kibbutz to deal with the volunteers, he was an American guy, but he had been there a long time. He recruited one of our group to be a spy. And that guy wrote down a list of people who were smoking, people who weren't. And he omitted his name from the list of people who were smoking. So anyway, we got kicked off the kibbutz in a very sly, subtle, sneaky, dishonest, unethical, obnoxious way. And we were left at a hotel in Jerusalem. And we had to leave. It was just like a one-day thing. And long story, I had a really bad experience on the bus going to Jerusalem, long trip, and I was in a really bad shape, woke up the next morning, and here's how fast life can change. So I knew that we could go to Tel Aviv and find a different kibbutz to volunteer, because at the time there were 3 different secular kibbutz movements, and we could just sign up with one that was not part of kibbutz Sasa, because somebody might know about what happened. So we did that, and we got assigned to a kibbutz in a different part of Israel. But before we went to kibbutz Israel, which was very friendly, we went to Tel Aviv, of course. Well, we were in Tel Aviv, which is where the offices of those kibbutz movements were. So we went, of course, to the Mediterranean. And I knew about this hotel called the Dan Hotel, which at the time was sort of the biggest deal, 69, right on the sea, right on the Mediterranean. We went over there, and we absurdly thought that we might find somebody who would invite us to their room. We had no place to stay. There were 4 of us. My best friend, Ronnie, from Silver Spring, Maryland, the 2 of us signed up. The other 2 people were 2 guys that were part of the group. And the 4 of us hung out together. One of the 4 had a guitar, played guitar, we sang. So we're standing in front of the Dan Hotel, and we're singing, and now it's about 1:30 in the morning. A black limo pulls up, and you know what this punchline is. Shlomo Carlebach gets out of the limo. He had just done a concert, and I talked to him right away, and we're talking very friendly, very warm, very open, and I actually asked him if we could spend the night in his suite. It wasn't just a room, he had a suite. And he said no, he couldn't do that, but that we should sleep on the beach and come up the next morning. So we slept on the beach, not easy to sleep. And in the morning, we went up to his suite. And in the suite were a bunch of people who were connected to him, his entourage, and getting ready for Shabbat, which starts on Friday night. And we had there was some challah and some wine. They're kind of doing Shabbat in advance, so to speak, as I recall. So there was a little bit of, things to eat, a lot of love. And Shlomo invited us to go with him, not in his car, but whatever way we could, to Jerusalem. Makes sense. Tel Aviv and Jerusalem are only about an hour apart, hour and a half. And of course, Jerusalem is the religious city, not totally, but it's the home of all of the major religious things, Jews, Christians, and Muslims. Tel Aviv is very secular, very modern. So we go to Jerusalem and we hook up with Shlomo at the Wailing Wall, which is the western wall of the remains of Solomon's Temple. And it's an amazing place. There's a huge, huge plaza next to it. And it became, even back then, it was already very tourist friendly. There were people from all over the world, not only Jews, Christians, and so forth. We got to see Shlomo in his best, at his best. He's out there on the plaza and he's playing guitar, not electric, of course. He's playing guitar and he's singing and he's giving little, not speeches, little hints of wisdom, little stories which Judaism loves to tell. And after that, we got invited by him to a yeshiva, which is a Jewish religious study school. And it was called the Diaspora Yeshiva, meaning that it was Jews from the diaspora. And it was considered kind of the hip yeshiva, right outside the walls, I think, of Jerusalem. We ate at a big, big, big dinner there, really big, Shabbat dinner, with Shlomo, with the people from the yeshiva, a lot of singing. It was a great experience. Those are the experiences from 69 that are about love, about good memories, most of them. There's some other stories from then, but I'm going to leave it at that. So thank you for listening to my stories. Let me say one other thing. Yeah, I invite people who have stories to tell about Israel or Palestine based on their own personal stories, not a story from a book, who have personal stories to tell, memories. They can be from way in the past or the present, not from the future. And I would really invite you to ask to come on, be in touch through our connections, which will be put up on the screen, and welcome you totally with generosity.